Hello, we are back with some more reading on the mystery book here, and we are still on chapter 5. Yuval Noah Harari, Robocop for the Empire. The last bits that we read about was when Harari was basically talking shit about the American Constitution and the American Declaration of Independence, basically. So making it very scientific with no heart and spirit. And I'll just read the differences really quick, and then we'll pick up back where we left off on. So the way that our American Declaration of Independence is told, it goes, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And in Harari's version, he rewrote it in the way that he thinks is correct, translated into biological terms. And this is how it goes. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men evolved differently, that they are born with certain mutable characteristics, that among these are life and the pursuit of pleasure. So definitely a lot different and very much carnal in nature, and taking out the soul aspect in it altogether. So let's pick up from the last time. So if all social order is only imagined, how do you get people to accept your new and improved order? You have to be constantly organizing the people and continually educating them. Becoming a global dictator and forcing your will on the planet's population requires a lot of work. You need to get up early and work late. They don't mention that enough in Evil Dictator School. Harari explains, you also educate people constantly. From the moment they are born, you constantly remind them of the principles of the imagined order, which are incorporated into anything and everything. They are incorporated into fairy tales, dramas, paintings, songs, etiquette, political propaganda, architecture, recipes, and fashions. For example, today people believe in equality. So it's fashionable for rich kids to wear jeans, which were originally working class attire. How is Harari striking you? Are you comfortable with the fact that it appears he's softening you up for an attack on equality? In addition, he wants you to know he's ready to go to war against all the things that you believe. In place of culture, which Harari seems to hold up as suspect because it upholds the imagined order of society, rather than the accumulated wisdom of centuries, Harari wants to celebrate bureaucracy. In a section he titles, without even a hint of irony, The Wonders of Bureaucracy. And it goes as follows. In order to function, the people who operate such a system of drawers must be reprogrammed to stop thinking as humans and start thinking as clerks and accountants. As everyone from ancient times until today knows, clerks and accountants think in a non-human fashion. They think like filing cabinets. This is not their fault. If they don't think that way, their drawers will get all mixed up, and they won't be able to provide the services their government, company, or organization requires. So basically, you have to be a machine. The most important impact of script on human history is precisely this. It has gradually changed the way humans think and view the world. Free association and holistic thought have given way to compartmentalization and bureaucracy. Are there any accountants out there who might take exception to Harari's claims? The accountants I've known generally seem to be the best judges of human nature because they understand nothing reveals more about a person than where they spend their money. Rather than being disconnected from humanity, accountants are vitally connected to other human beings. And I'd hazard to guess that most people who work in a bureaucracy are painfully aware of the evidence put forward by generations of historians that the horror of Hitler's Germany could never have taken place without the blind eye of most of the German bureaucratic state. If you become an accountant or a bureaucrat, it does not mean you lose your humanity and turn into something else. I would also argue that compartmentalization was an enormous part of how the German nation was led into barbarism. As bureaucrats could go home and sleep at night thinking, I'm not persecuting Jews. I'm just making sure they get on the trains to go to their camps. In the chapter titled The Arrow of History, Harari starts to envision how one might create this all-encompassing world order. And it goes as follows. Merchants, conquerors, and prophets were the first people who managed to transcend the binary evolutionary division, us versus them, and to foresee the potential unity of humankind. For the merchants, the entire world was a single market, and all humans were potential customers. They tried to establish an economic order that would apply to all, everywhere. For the conquerors, the entire world was a single empire, and all humans were potential subjects. And for the prophets, the entire world held a single truth, and all humans were potential believers. End quote. One might imagine Harari working in his academic ivory tower pondering, what did history's most dangerous megalomaniacs do right, and how can my friends avoid their mistakes? In the chapter that follows, The Scent of Money, Harari seems to have found his answer. The tyrants of the past just didn't bribe enough people, and when that didn't work, they needed to be more brutal. Harari sums up the problem in the concluding paragraph of his chapter, and it goes as follows. It is common nowadays to believe that the market always prevails, and that the dams erected by kings, priests, and communities cannot hold back the tides of money. This is naive. Brutal warriors, religious fanatics, and concerned citizens have repeatedly managed to trounce calculating merchants and even to reshape the economy. It is therefore impossible to understand the unification of humankind as a purely economic process. In order to understand how thousands of isolated cultures coalesced over time to form the global village of today, we must take into account the role of gold and silver. But we cannot disregard the equally crucial role of steel. End quote. That paragraph deeply troubles me. It seems to suggest that the success of any political system is based on the use of force rather than persuasion. And rather than the persuasion that typifies political discourse in a republic, Harari seems to prefer the force used by an empire. If you are a Star Wars fan, or even just a casual reader of history, you might be appalled to learn that Harari loves empires. He seeks to glorify them, despite how much brutality they may have caused to their people and others they deemed inferior. In a section titled Evil Empires, with a question mark, he lays out his belief. So that's, in his book, like he doesn't agree that they're evil. So it goes as follows. The truth is that empire has been the world's most common form of political organization for the last 2,500 years. Most humans during these 2.5 millennia have lived in empires. Empire is also a very stable form of government. Most empires have found it alarmingly easy to put down rebellions. In general, they've been toppled only by external invasion or by a split within the ruling elite. Conversely, conquered peoples don't have a very good record of freeing themselves from their imperial overlords. Most have remained subjugated for hundreds of years. Typically, they have been slowly digested by the conquering empire until their distinct cultures fizzled out. End quote. This is pretty much the standard left-wing critique of Western civilization, and yet Harari is saying that the obliteration of native cultures was a good thing. I stand second to none in the defense of Western values as developed during the Enlightenment, but I am not so blind as to deny the horrible historical acts perpetuated by Europeans as they spread across the globe. I will argue that these acts were a direct betrayal of the principles of the Enlightenment and should be condemned by all people. True power comes from the persuasion of rational arguments, not by the sword. Harari continues with his worship of empires as follows. It is tempting to divide history into good guys and bad guys, with all empires being among the bad guys. For the vast majority of empires were founded on blood and maintained their power through oppression and war. Yet, most of today's cultures are based on imperial legacies. If empires are by definition bad, what does that say about us? End quote. How can there be the slightest bit of doubt as to the methods Harari and his globalist friends will use to bring about their utopia? They are not horrified by oppression and war. They see oppression and war as useful tools, and they must be used ruthlessly. And I need to turn the AC back on. Otherwise, I am going to end up freaking burning out. So just hold on. All right, back. Much better. Okay, that's still on. Harari continues his terror parade, hyping the threat of nuclear war and climate change, scaring you into thinking you need somebody to save you before letting you know that he has the answers. Hint, they involve genetic engineering, turning you into a robot and creating an AI god to rule over humanity. I wish I were kidding. And then Harari begins his argument. An even greater challenge is posed by new technologies such as bioengineering and artificial intelligence. As we shall see in the last chapter, these technologies could be used to re-engineer not just our weapons and vehicles, but even our bodies and our minds. Indeed, they could be used to create completely new types of life forms and change the future course of evolution. Who will decide what to do with such divine powers of creation? Do these globalists now appear to you as the ultimate mad scientists? Just a little bit. Not only will they enslave you, but they will gleefully re-engineer you, perhaps with machines or gene editing to better suit their purposes. After denigrating the pursuit of happiness in the American Declaration of Independence, he justifies his draconian imperial measures in one of his concluding chapters titled, "And They Lived Happily Ever After." Harari notes the amazing progress of humanity over the past 500 years, which amazingly coincides with the development of the ideas of personal freedom as defined by the Enlightenment, and then questions whether this progress has made us happier. And he writes, "What would happen if serious research were to disprove these hypotheses? If economic growth and self-reliance do not make people happier, then what's the benefit of capitalism? What if it turns out that the subjects of large empires are generally happier than the citizens of independent states, and that, for example, Ghanaians, were happier under British colonial rule than under their own homegrown dictators? What would that say about the process of decolonization and the value of national self-determination. It's in a passage like this in which we come to understand how willing Harari is to engage in duplicity. In an earlier section of the book, he claimed that happiness was such an elusive concept to define that the best we could hope to do was measure pleasure. Yet now he's claiming this brave new world he wants to create will be a happier one, as our material advancement has not made us happier. Harari explains, this raises the possibility that the immense improvement in material conditions over the last 2 centuries was offset by the collapse of the family and the community. If so, the average person might well be no happier today than in 1800. Even the freedom we value so highly may be working against us. We can choose our spouses, friends, and neighbors, but they can choose to leave us. With the individual wielding unprecedented power to decide her own path in life, we find it even harder to make commitments. We thus live in an increasingly lonely world of unraveling communities and families. You know, it's interesting that he chose to depict a woman, because in this part, I'm just noticing this, of what Harari wrote, with the individual wielding unprecedented power to decide her own life or own path in life. And then in the beginning of it, I find it interesting how he mentions we can choose our spouses, friends, and neighbors, but they can choose to leave us. You know what this sounds like to me? The way that he writes this out. And on a psychological, from a psychological standpoint, it sounds like a man that was traumatized by a woman or has trauma from someone, like the love of their life leaving them or something, and they have fears of people leaving them. So therefore, what do? You want to control everything. You don't want that to ever happen again. So you don't take risks because that's too scary. Because then you always think to yourself, well, they can leave me, they can leave me, they can leave me. What if they leave me? What will I do if they leave me? That's just kind of how it comes off, especially since I'm just pointing that out, okay, from what I noticed, but I'm going to continue on. So that was the end of what he said. It's difficult to wrap one's mind around the idea that Harari and his fellow globalists are actively calling for your freedom to be restricted, just as in the terrifying dystopian future of A Handmaid's Tale. They claim that you can't be trusted with freedom. Freedom makes you weak and unhappy. But Harari then moves to how he's going to make you happier. No surprise that it's by convincing you that you want what he wants. Here's the simplistic explanation put forth by Harari. Get ready for the harness to be placed around your neck. It goes, but the most important finding of all is that happiness does not really depend on objective conditions of either wealth, health, or even community. Rather, it depends on the correlation between objective conditions and subjective expectations. If you want a bullock cart and get a bullock cart, you are content. Exactly. Controlling the situation so that you don't have to worry about losing what you expect to have and keep. If you want a brand new Ferrari and get only a secondhand Fiat, you feel deprived. This is why winning the lottery has over time the same impact on people's happiness as a debilitating car accident. When things improve, expectations balloon, and consequently, even dramatic improvements in objective conditions can leave us dissatisfied. Harari is quoting a famous 1978 study titled Lottery Winners and Accident Victims. Is happiness relative? That found that lottery winners were not as happy as expected, and that accident victims who'd been rendered paraplegic after a certain level of time had passed reported happiness levels that were higher than expected. This was explained by the idea of expectation and habituation. And Harari's analysis is well in the mainstream of traditional thought about these findings. However, others have noted that a different interpretation is possible, even likely. It's that our attitude, whether optimistic or pessimistic, eventually predominates, regardless of the conditions in which we live. An entire cottage industry of books has sprung up in recent years telling us that our attitude is the first thing we must fix in order to have the best chance of achieving our desired goals. Harari even seems to flirt with this idea. And this is where Harari, another part in his book. Think for a moment of your family and friends. You know some people who will remain relatively joyful no matter what befalls them. And then there are those who are always disgruntled, no matter what gifts the world lays at their feet. We tend to believe that if we could just change our workplace, get married, finish writing that novel, buy a new car, or repay the mortgage, we would be on top of the world. Yet, when we get what we desire, we don't seem to be any happier. Buying cars and writing novels do not change our biochemistry. They can startle it for a fleeting moment, but it is soon back to its set point. And so we come to Harari's answer to the question of human happiness. It's not your attitude or anything you might develop on your own. It's your biochemistry. Don't worry about eating healthy food, exercising, having positive social relationships, or developing a relationship with God. Harari is going to make it all better by giving you a happiness pill. It'll be just like smoking pot when you were a teenager because that's how you dealt with things, or drinking alcohol at 10 in the morning. But somehow alcohol and other drugs never confronted the real problems of your life. Yep. Remember, it's always important to be a victim in Harari's world, not somebody who takes responsibility. Harari seems to take particular delight in the possibility of a drugged out world, as he expresses his enthusiasm for the future depicted by Aldous Huxley in his 1932 science fiction novel, Brave New World. And it goes as follows. In Aldous Huxley's dystopian novel, Brave New World, published in 1932 at the height of the Great Depression, happiness is the supreme value, and psychiatric drugs replace the police and the ballot as the foundation of politics. Every day, each person takes a dose of Soma, a synthetic drug, which makes people happy without harming their productivity and efficiency. The world state that governs the entire globe is never threatened by wars, revolutions, strikes, or demonstrations, because all people are supremely content with their current conditions, whatever they may be. Huxley's vision is far more troubling than George Orwell's 1984. Huxley's world seems monstrous to most readers, but it's hard to explain why. Everybody is happy all the time. What could be wrong with that? End quote. Actually, it's not hard to explain why Huxley's world seems monstrous to most readers. It's because it is monstrous. Most people don't want to live their life in a drugged out haze. They want to be alive, not impaired, or not dependent either. Being dependent on that, which you become a slave to. They want to feel the highs and lows of life because that's what reminds you that you're alive. When you have emotions, when you go through things and you feel things and you're not numbed out by things, and you have all of your faculties there to really think for yourself. That's my personal opinion as well. That's what gives life meaning. Harari reminds me of nothing more than some religion-obsessed monk of the Middle Ages who, while seeking the enlightenment of the spiritual world, will engage in the greatest acts of brutality in the physical world. He would beat a person for an impure thought while not realizing the damage he is doing to God's creation. He is the villain who believes himself to be the hero as he initiates the Inquisition. Harari tires not just of humanity, but indeed he is done with the natural world itself. And here's another excerpt from his book. Today, the 4 billion-year-old regime of natural selection is facing a completely different challenge. In laboratories around the world, scientists are engineering living beings. They break the laws of natural selection with impunity, unbridled by even an organism's original characteristics. Eduardo Kac, a Brazilian bioartist, decided in 2000 to create a new work of art, a fluorescent green rabbit. Kac contacted a French laboratory and offered it a fee to engineer a radiant bunny according to his specifications. The French scientist took a run-of-the-mill rabbit embryo, implanted in its DNA a gene taken from a green fluorescent jellyfish, and voila, one green fluorescent rabbit for Les Monsieur. Les Monsieur. Kac named the rabbit Alba. I did not know that. Harari is thrilled beyond belief at this turn of events, greeting it with the reverence a UFO enthusiast might react to a flying saucer landing on the south lawn of the White House. For these globalists, every scientific advance heralded the dawn of an exciting new era in which they will finally be triumphant. And then it goes back to another excerpt from his book. After 4 billion years of natural selection, Alba stands at the dawn of a new cosmic era in which life will be ruled by intelligent design. If this happens, the whole of human history up to that point might, with hindsight, be reinterpreted as a process of experimentation and apprenticeship that revolutionized the game of life. Such a process should be understood from a cosmic perspective of billions of years rather than from a human perspective of millennia. It's difficult to get giddier than Harari does in that passage. I'm just a little surprised how anybody can claim Harari is an academic historian when he uses phrases like new cosmic era with a straight face. Isn't his work a little more appropriate for some new age self-help book than a university campus? However, Harari isn't going to be satisfied with you feeling better about yourself, of having a clean aura like your typical new age zealot. You get to be biologically re-engineered. Harari explains. At the time of writing, the replacement of natural selection by intelligent design could happen in any of 3 ways: through biological engineering, cyborg engineering. Cyborgs are beings that combine organic with non-organic parts, or the engineering of inorganic life. If by chance you find yourself a little concerned by this radical new idea of biological engineering, Harari is quick to remind you that you don't need to worry. In fact, you didn't even have to fear the old type of biological engineering. And another excerpt from Harari's book. There is nothing new about biological engineering per se. People have been using it for millennia in order to reshape themselves and other organisms. A simple example is castration. Yeah. Humans have been castrating bulls for perhaps 10,000 years in order to create oxen. Oxen are less aggressive and are thus easier to train to pull plows. Humans also castrated their own young males to create soprano singers with enchanting voices and eunuchs who could safely be entrusted with overseeing the Sultan's harem. Yeah, I've heard about eunuchs, but I didn't know that they did that to soprano singers. The fuck? That's horrible. Many are worried about losing their First and Second Amendment rights in this new world order being promoted by Klaus Schwab and his globalists. But perhaps the men of the old world order should be equally fearful of losing their balls if Schwab and his minions develop an ear for enchanting voices or decide that harems are a pretty good idea. I like that idea. Yeah. I like that idea. Just take a chop suey knife and chop them off. And how far might this biological engineering go? After talking about how pigs can be genetically altered to turn bad omega-6 fatty acid into the healthier omega-3 fatty acid, Harari lets you know the full extent of his plan. And it goes like this. The next generation of genetic engineering will make pigs with good fat look like child's play. Geneticists have managed not merely to extend the average life expectancy of worms, but also to engineer genius mice that display much improved memory and learning skills. Voles are small, stout rodents resembling mice, and most varieties of moles are promiscuous. But there is one species in which boy and girl voles form long-lasting and monogamous relationships. So, voles. VOLES. So it's like, I guess this is a combination of it's like a genetically engineered species that he's talking about. Geneticist claims to have isolated the genes responsible for vole monogamy. If the addition of a gene can turn a vole Don Juan into a loyal and loving husband, are we far off from being able to genetically engineer not only the individual abilities of rodents and humans, but also their social structure? I think that's what he means. That is a genetically engineered. I've never heard of a vole before. I've heard of moles, but not vole. Correct me if I'm wrong. Let's imagine the future that Harari imagines comes to pass, and we develop remarkable technologies to cure disease or increase our abilities. Maybe people will eventually be able to do marathons in their 90s, in addition to doing work that fulfills them, as they offer an unprecedented wisdom to the young. Do you imagine you will be in control of such decisions, or will you be under the thumb of the globalists, those people who think empires and a drugged-out populace are such a good idea? But perhaps, like the globalists, you are somewhat disgusted by the physical world. You lust after the sleekness of machines. You may want to become a cyborg, like Arnold Schwarzenegger in the Terminator movies, or the Borg of Star Trek, or the dead policeman brought back to life and fitted with the latest technology to become RoboCop in the series of movies that depict a dystopian future where police work is outsourced to an evil corporation that oppresses the citizens. Harari is happy to upgrade you. And here's another excerpt. There's another new technology which could change the laws of life: cyborg engineering. Cyborgs are beings that combine organic and inorganic parts, such as human with bionic hands. In a sense, nearly all of us are bionic these days, since our natural senses and functions are supplemented by devices such as glasses, pacemakers, orthotics, and even computers and mobile phones, which relieve our brains of some of their data storage and processing burdens. We stand poised on the brink of becoming true cyborgs, of having inorganic features that are inseparable from our bodies, features that modify our abilities, desires, personalities, and identities. The enormous leaps of logic made by Harari are breathtaking. I'm sure you didn't realize those reading glasses made you a cyborg. No, I didn't realize that. Apparently, there's not much difference between the typical drugstore reading glasses you pick up for $10 and having a chip implanted in your head. Of course, it starts with bugs, but we know it won't end there. And here's another excerpt. The Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, a U.S. military research agency, is developing cyborgs out of insects. The idea is to implant electronic chips, detectors, and processors in the body of a fly or a cockroach, which I've seen actually a video like quite a while back, like several years ago. I watched a video of a cockroach that was being controlled because there was a chip in the cockroach, and They were like a remote control. Yeah, it's freaking weird as hell. Which will enable either a human or an automatic operator to control the insect's movements remotely and to absorb and transmit information. Such a fly could be sitting on the wall at enemy headquarters, eavesdropping on the most secret conversations, and if it isn't caught first by a spider, could inform us exactly what the enemy was planning. When you read Harari, you sometimes feel like you're the fictional British spy Austin Powers, listening in on the plans of Dr. Evil. But instead of sharks with frickin' lasers on their heads, you get remote control flies with chips in their bodies. And have no fear, the cyborgs will eventually be turned on those who do not submit. And you will be assimilated. I'm going to end it there for now, because this video is quite long, but we still have quite a bit before we get to chapter 6. So I'll just finish the rest of it next time. I hope you guys liked it. Peace.